Hello and welcome to Assessment for Adult Learning, Assignment 3 PBL Scenario by Chantal, Angela, Umber, and Sanya. In this video presentation, here's an overview. We will be discussing current scenario, what is the problem, solution, analysis question, what is student-centered learning, why and how educators should implement student-centered learning. Meet Ms Educator. Over the course of the school year, Ms Educator experiences different emotions ranging from happiness to frustration. When the initial excitement slowed down, the workload became overwhelming. Her responsibilities vary, such as teaching a class, keeping up with administrative procedures, taking work home, and never having a minute of free time. As the end of the school year approaches around the beginning of May, her students did an online survey. The survey allows students to voice their issues, needs, and learning preferences. This survey gives feedback on how Ms. Educator can engage students in authentic tasks and higher order thinking. Ms. Educator reflected on what she needs to improve, and she realizes that her focus in the classroom was teacher-centered. The problem for our scenario is teacher-centered. So what is teacher-centered? In a teacher-centered environment, the teacher's role is to provide primary content by talking, and students listen exclusively. The teacher relies heavily upon the textbook to guide instructional decision-making. The students learn on their own. There is no space for students' personal growth. Teacher-centered doesn't allow students to participate and express and represent themselves. Instruction from the teacher occurs frequently with the whole class. Small group or individual instruction occur less often, and collaboration is discouraged. Use of class time is largely determined by the teacher. Teacher-centered instruction can be boring for students, and in this case, their mind may wander and they may miss out on important facts. And lastly, this approach is based on teachers' input and on assessment in the perspective of how well the learner or students educated themselves on the material given.
Solution for a scenario: the shift from teacher-centered learning to student-centered learning. To ensure that the students are benefiting from their learning experience, there needs to be a teaching approach that includes their voices and suggestion. The switch from teacher-centered learning to student-centered learning shows that the teacher is giving up their individualistic and self-benefiting approach into a style of learning that give importance to the students and their needs more than the teachers. The general role of the student-centered learning is to establish both independent and reasonable learners for the future. There are many positive benefits to utilizing a student-centered learning, dominating their practices and understanding as a learner. As research has shown that students learn and process how to express themselves, articulating their individual ideas and the engagement within their work. Students also work on inquiry-based learning alongside enhancing their problem-solving skills. Analysis question: what is student-centered learning? Why student-centered learning and not teacher-centered learning? How can a teacher implement a teacher-centered learning to a student-centered learning? What is student-centered learning? Student-centered learning is an informative perspective which focuses on the learners instead of the educator. This is a philosophy or a mindset instituted where the student is the center of the learning process, meaning that all of the educational needs and requirements range from what is being taught and the manner it is being taught in, completely building the learning of the student's need. In the student-centered learning approach, assigning work individually for the students, or it can represent how others can help learners construct and develop the understanding needed for the intended learning outcome. For example, peer assessment work conducted by the other students can be made equally status. Students often partake in peer assessment following the formal assessment given. They reflect upon their individual efforts as this extended and enhances the reflection made by viewing and exchanging feedback on their own personal work and others' work as well.
Why?
Why implement student-centered learning? The industrial age conception of education, which is teacher-led learning, is no longer adequate in the information age we now live in. The learners can become active makers of knowledge, and they are even co-responsible for knowledge creation, being presented with real-life problems in collaborative and social environment in which they apply their skills and experience to solve the problems and even to construct the knowledge. Some benefits of student-centered learning are teachers become co-learners along with their students. Teachers and course materials can be wrong, and people understand that knowledge is changeable and subject to debate. Students engage in more peer interaction throughout the course or semester. Students have a voice in what they will study and how they will study it. Students also do assessment along with teachers, such as peer and self-assessment. Students are given learning tasks that they can make connections to during their present day life. Teachers and students attempt to build ongoing motivation. Students are encouraged to go beyond what they have been taught, which allows them to develop thinking skills. There are multiple ways of teaching student-led learning, which students are valued and become enthusiastic about learning. If Ms Edu decided to use the student-centered approach, why should she use peer assessment? Well, peer assessment encourages students to take responsibility for their own learning. It gives students the tools to learn how to assess and give others constructive feedback. It empowers students' learning through knowledge diffusion and exchange of ideas. It also motivates students to engage in the course material. How?
How can Ms Educator implement a teacher-centered learning to a student-centered learning? There are many ways she can use. For example, by increasing student engagement, asking her students open-ended questions throughout her lecture can help increase student engagement, and by relating the topics that are being learned to real-life context. Context-based videos in online courses have the potential to enhance learners' retention and motivation by frequent communication with the professor. For example, if Ms Educator can post 1 or 2 points on the weekly message board. Periodic required videos responses from students for selected prompts. For example, by using software such as Flipgrid, students can respond to the questions that are being asked for the weekly discussions by relating a real-time facilitation of discussion, response, and interaction. Additional examples are peer grading. As discussed before, peer grading encourages students to take responsibility for their own learning, and peers can give continuous feedback. Work in small groups. Discussion boards. Students to ask the question so that other students can see the question and the answer. Homework assignment. Students are electronically collaborated, assigned peer documents to grade, and then required to grade their own assignment as well.
Please take a moment to review our synthesis questions. Number 1, what are some evidence that Ms Educator's approach is not a student-centered approach? Number 2, could the implementation of peer assessment enable Ms Educator to better gauge her students' learning? And number 3, final question, how can Ms Educator conduct a real-world classroom environment?
Following are the resources from our research.
If you would like to learn more about teacher-centered and student-centered learning, here are some additional resources you can refer to. Thank you for watching.